Welcome to the 991 Carrera T. Now those more longer term subscribers to my YouTube channel might remember a video from a couple of years ago. It was at the launch of the Carrera T and I picked up the car from Monte Carlo and essentially repatriated it back to the UK for Porsche GB. I'll put a link to the video up here so you can go back and either refresh your memory if you can't quite remember or see it for the first time. In a nutshell, while I thought the car was good, wasn't completely overawed by it, but that was 2 years ago. And I feel that particularly with the introduction of the 992, time has changed the landscape somewhat. It'd be prudent therefore to revisit the Carrera T as what we know to be now as the last ever narrow-bodied Porsche 911. Quibbles with the car that I just couldn't see past. One of which was around weight. When Porsche released this car, it was billed as a lightweight car of sorts. Now the argument at the time, and to be fair it's still a valid argument today, was that the car came in at 20 kilos lighter than the Carrera so long as you did not spec air conditioning or the PCM unit, which is a really tough call. I think you've got to be very brave to not spec those. Most people did. The car therefore, that 20 kilo advantage it had over the base Carrera was nullified. So to call it a lightweight car was possibly a little bit naughty. The other thing really emanates from the gearbox. Porsche at the time said the Carrera T offered a shorter shift. Well, it did in the sense that the shifter itself was shorter, so therefore the throw was minimally shorter, but otherwise it's exactly the same linkage and setup as that base Carrera, albeit with the Carrera S final drive. Now, as we all know, I've been very vocal about this in previous videos, I do feel like the 7-speed it's the Achilles heel of the 991 generation. It's no surprise that so many 991s were specced with PDK, which was a nice little earner for Porsche, by the way, because at the time that was a £2,500 upgrade over the no-cost manual. I digress. So the T as a driver's car, which was a homage, albeit lower down the food chain, to the GT3 and the R, it was stuck with a 7-speed from the Carrera rather than that glorious 6-speed box from those GT cars. And what's even more excruciating is, since that first video, I learned from Dr. Frank Stefan Volliser himself, head of the 911 production line these days, that Porsche did trial that 6-speed in the Carrera T. Talk about being so close yet so far to perfection. Well, it wasn't to be, was it? And the T got lumbered with a 7-speed, which at the time I said still ultimately had the inherent problems of all 991 generation cars with the manual gear shift. Clunky, not very precise, just a pretty ham-fisted go really of a manual gearbox, and something that's really a step back from the 6-speed even in the 997 generation cars before it. 2 years on, where are we at then? Why are we revisiting the Carrera T? First reason is values. The T was 85 grand new in the UK. With options, you'd reasonably expect to pay about 95 to 100. And I even know of a couple of cars selling for about 5k over list price, which is mental. Now though, just 24 months on, the T can be had like this with 22k on the clock for around 70k. It's taken a hell of a hit really, hasn't it? 30%. And whilst the Carrera T is arguably better value than ever before, I'd also say it's more appealing than ever before as well. It relates to the 992 and it also relates to the sequence at the top of this video of getting in the car and turning the ignition on and that sort of stuff. That was not mere content filler. The reason I did that is because I want to illustrate that that is something you can't do in a 992 anymore. By virtue of the fact then that in the Carrera T you have a door handle that doesn't try and second guess when you'd like to get in it, by the fact that you have an actual key that you get to put in an actual ignition, not to mention the fact that the clocks have actual mechanical moving parts in front of me rather than just boring digital screens. Those few bits mean that the Carrera T, despite only being 2 years old, is already on the classic spectrum of the 911's lineage against the 992, which is bigger, heavier and absolutely doused in technology. Really then, the 992 generation has done the Carrera T a huge favour, and its initial shortcomings look to be diminishing with time too, starting with that gearbox. It does now offer a slightly smoother shift. Everything's loosened up quite nicely there. It hasn't completely eliminated that sloppiness through the gate. Could I live with it? Well, yes I could. It's a marked improvement over that early car that I did drive 2 years ago. Back to the weight for a second. I have actually weighed this car, not particularly scientifically, it was on my local weigh bridge. Came in at 1440 kilos. That's with PCM and aircon and rear axle steering, which I rate just adds another layer of dexterity to the car and agility, directness to its turning that might otherwise be lacking. But as I'm about to elaborate on, weight is not the central appeal to the Carrera T. Where the Carrera T wins is in driver engagement. Its sport chassis and revised final drive adds real dynamism, even at road speeds. With the T, it's all about using second, third and fourth gears to sew those corners together. That should tell you everything in terms of pace. There's no need to be falling foul of the law to get the best from this car, and that's such a rare and beautiful trait to have from a modern sports car. The other thing I've really come to appreciate through these twisties is that because this isn't as stiff as the GT3 or the R, for example, plus don't forget it's on the narrowest tyres you can get on a modern 911, it really does move around underneath you quite nicely, provides loads of feedback, again at a sensible speed. It's all about just managing that grip. The 370 horsepower of the Carrera T, more than enough for a road bias car such as this. The other thing is noise, and especially again looking at the 992s, they've all been strangled by that gasoline particulate filter. The T, free of those, much more noisy, pops and bangs in sports exhaust. Really, I view the Carrera T as a modern day club sport. The 3.2 Carrera, which on paper had minimal weight saving and no power gain over stock. The sum of its parts though was much more than that. These days it's revered by those in the know, and my feeling is it's a destiny that the T might one day realise too. So that then is the Carrera T. Is it perfect? Well, no, not really. We learnt this a couple of years ago for my first video. However, I really do feel like with the passage of time, its foibles have paled while its charm has only increased, particularly against the backdrop of the bigger, heavier and more tech-laden 992s. I really do feel like that trend is going to continue going forward as well. History might be very kind indeed to what is the last ever narrow-bodied Porsche 911.